Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India.
Good morning, you're watching DD India and I'm Preeti presenting this edition of News on the Hour, a program we get for you every morning to make sure that you keep yourself abreast with everything that's making it to the headlines. First, we get you the top stories. Bhupendra Patel to take oath as Chief Minister of Gujarat today, says with everyone together we will take Gujarat forward on the path of development. Union Home Minister Amit Shah and BJP President JP Nadda congratulate him, says under his leadership the ongoing development journey of the state will get new vigor and energy. India achieves another milestone in the fight against COVID. Over 74.38 crore vaccines administered across the country so far. 6 states and union territories administer first COVID vaccine dose to 100% of adult population. Goa extends ongoing state-level curfew till September 20th. People coming in from Kerala asked to undergo 5 days quarantine. US and India to launch climate action and finance mobilization dialogue today. US's special presidential envoy for climate, John Kerry, arrives in India for a 2-day visit, aims to lay the groundwork for American efforts ahead of a key United Nations climate conference scheduled for November. UN chief to convene humanitarian conference on Afghanistan today, seeks $600 million to avert humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Amidst chaos, Taliban issues new decree in Afghanistan. New condition laid for education of women. Higher Education Minister says classes and Islamic clothing will be mandatory for boys and girls. And in sports, in the US Open, Russian Daniil Medvedev beats Novak Djokovic to lift maiden Grand Slam title. Defeats Serbian in straight sets 6-4, 6-4, 6-4, ends Djokovic's bid for the first calendar year Grand Slam. Alright, those are the top stories. Let's get to the news in detail. We begin with the national headlines first. Bhupendra Patel will take oath as the 17th Chief Minister of Gujarat today, replacing Vijay Rupani ahead of the assembly elections in 2022. Union Minister Amit Shah is expected to attend the oath ceremony, while the decision regarding the new Gujarat cabinet will be taken later. Bhupendra Patel became an MLA in 2017 from Ghatlodhia Assembly constituency in Gujarat after defeating Congress's Shashikant Patel by a margin of over 1,17,000 votes. He also chaired the standing committee of the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. Bhupendra Patel is not only the first-time Chief Minister of the state, but also a first-time minister. Up next, we take a look at yesterday's developments before and after the announcement of Bhupendra Patel's name.
Bhupendra Patel, a member of Legislative Assembly from Ghatlodhia constituency, has been elected as the new Chief Minister of Gujarat. Union Minister and BJP's Gujarat in charge Narendra Singh Tomar made the announcement after the party's legislative meeting in Gandhinagar.
विधायक दल की बैठक में नए विधानमंडल दल के नेता के रूप में श्री भूपेंद्र रजनीकांत पटेल प्रस्ताव का समर्थन हो गया है।
थैंक यू भाई। अमन भाई इधर रुको, इधर आ जाओ अमन भाई। देखो आए इधर।
Following the announcement of his name, Bhupendra Patel said he will take forward the development journey of Gujarat and will work with everyone's cooperation.
सबसे पहले माननीय नरेंद्र भाई, माननीय नड्डा जी और अमित भाई शाह साहब का तहे दिल से आभार मानना चाहता हूं और गुजरात प्रदेश के सभी वरिष्ठ नेता माननीय CR पाटिल साहब और हमारे विजय भाई साहब की टीम का सबका मैं तहे दिल से धन्यवाद मानता हूं। मेरे पर जो विश्वास रखा है वो विश्वास को बिना टूटे हुए विकास के जो काम बाकी है वो आगे बढ़ाएंगे और साथ में संगठन को साथ में लेके आगे बढ़ाएंगे। थैंक यू।
Congratulatory messages poured in for Bhupendra Patel from the announcement of his name. Home Minister Amit Shah congratulated Bhupendra Patel. He said, "Heartiest congratulations and best wishes to Shri Bhupendra ji on being elected as the leader of BJP Gujarat Legislature Party. I'm sure that under the guidance of Narendra Modi ji and under your leadership, the continuous development journey of the state will get new energy and momentum, and Gujarat will continue to be a leader in good governance and public welfare." While BJP President JP Nadda also congratulated Bhupendra Patel, Nadda in a tweet said, "Heartiest congratulations and best wishes to Shri Bhupendra ji on being elected as the leader of BJP Gujarat Legislature Party. I'm sure that under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, you will give a new energy and momentum to the development journey of Gujarat and the works of public welfare with full devotion and dedication." Vijay Rupani had resigned as the Chief Minister of Gujarat on Saturday. BJP had sent Union Ministers Narendra Singh Tomar and Prahlad Joshi as observers for the Legislature Party meeting to elect a new Chief Minister. The newly appointed Chief Minister of Gujarat, Bhupendra Patel, met the State Governor Acharya Devvrat to stake claim to form government. Bureau Report, DD India.
6 states and union territories of the country have achieved 100% coverage of the adult population with the first dose of the vaccine against COVID-19. Himachal Pradesh was among the first states to have vaccinated all the eligible adults. The other 2 states are Goa and Sikkim, while Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu, Ladakh and Lakshadweep were the 3 union territories to have achieved the feat. In a tweet, Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia congratulated these states and union territories for the achievement. He extended special appreciation for the health workers in these regions for their diligence and commitment. The announcement from the Health Minister also came on the day when the country's cumulative COVID-19 vaccination coverage went past the 740 million mark as announced by the Union Health Ministry earlier in the day. Notably, there are some states in the country that are vaccinating swifter than other countries. Uttar Pradesh is doing better than United States of America, while Gujarat is vaccinating its people in more numbers than Mexico. The other states include Karnataka, which is vaccinating faster than Russia, Madhya Pradesh than France, and also Haryana is doing it faster than Canada. Up next, we take a look at COVID-related information from across the country. The recovery of 37,687 patients in the last 24 hours has increased the cumulative tally of recovered patients to 3,24,47,032. Consequently, India's recovery rate stands at 97.54%. Sustained and collaborated efforts by the centre and the states and union territories continue the trend of less than 50,000 daily new cases. 27,254 new cases were reported in the last 24 hours. The active case load is presently 3,74,269. And active cases presently constitute 1.13% of the country's total positive cases. The testing capacity across the country continues to be expanded. The last 24 hours saw a total of 12.08 lakh tests being conducted. India has so far conducted over 54.3 crore cumulative tests. While testing capacity has been enhanced across the country, weekly positivity rate at 2.11% remains less than 3% for the last 80 days now. The daily positivity rate stands at 2.26%. Also, the daily positivity rate has remained below 3% for the last 14 days. The Goa government has extended the ongoing state-level curfew till September 20th. People coming from Kerala have been asked to undergo 5 days quarantine. If they are students or employees from Kerala, they have to undergo institutional quarantine, while the rest have to undergo home quarantine. Curfew was first imposed in Goa in the month of May when the state was reeling under the second wave of the pandemic. It was extended on multiple times, and current statewide curfew was going to end on September 13th. The state government has allowed almost all economic activities with certain restrictions. However, major tourist attractions like casinos and water sports are not allowed during the curfew. In Kerala, vaccination coverage is strengthening in the state, which reached 79% of the eligible population with at least one dose. As vaccination coverage had improved, the state health institutions are facing lesser pressure, with only 12.9% requiring medical care at field and other hospitals. State had revised its testing strategies, mandating RT-PCR tests alone for all cases except for those requiring immediate hospital treatment. Also, this step has increased the percentage of RT-PCR tests in the overall test figures. Meanwhile, traffic moved without restrictions in Kochi as Kerala repealed the Sunday lockdown. Chief Minister P. Vijayan announced that the weekend lockdown in the state would be lifted along with night curfew, citing a fall in the state's test positivity rate. Traffic movement continued normally without any restrictions. Tamil Nadu government on Sunday launched a mega vaccination drive against COVID-19 at Coimbatore. The mega vaccination drive aims to vaccinate the remaining unvaccinated sections of the society. The drive will run on weekly basis with 40,000 special vaccination camps. Earlier, the state government had instructed the educational institutions to vaccinate lecturers, teachers and those above 18 years of age as the institutions have started to function. The United States and India will launch Climate Action and Finance Mobilization Dialogue, or the CAFMD, one of the two main tracks of the US-India Agenda 2030 partnership that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and also President Joe Biden announced at the Leaders Summit on Climate in April 2021. US's Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, arrived in India on Sunday for his two-day visit. Kerry is expected to meet Union Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav today and also other government officials regarding New Delhi's climate ambitions. The Special Envoy's visit from September 12th to 14th will involve discussions to raise global climate ambition and also speed India's clean energy transition. And also Kerry's visit to New Delhi, the second since his appointment to this role, was also described by the State Department as part of US's initiative to bolster climate efforts ahead of the 26th Conference of the Parties, or the COP26, to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. CBI has arrested 11 accused, including 7 yesterday and 4 a day before, in the ongoing investigation of 2 separate cases related to violence and other offences in West Bengal. CBI had also registered these cases on the orders of Honorable High Court of Calcutta and taken over the investigation of the cases earlier registered by the state police. Investigation is continuing in these cases. In Maharashtra, heavy rainfall led traffic jam at the Western Express Highway on Sunday night. The Indian Met Department has predicted extremely heavy rainfall for central Maharashtra today. The Weather Department has predicted extremely heavy to very heavy rains till September 15th under an orange alert for Palghar region. Last rites of the newly recruited Sub-Inspector Arshad Ahmed Mir, martyred in Srinagar in a terror attack, took place at his home in Kupwara last evening. Sub-Inspector Arshad was martyred after terrorists fired upon police party near Khanyar area of Central Kashmir's Srinagar district. Ahmed was rushed to hospital where he succumbed to his injuries. The whole area has been cordoned off to nab the attackers. Ahmed was a resident of Kupwara in North Kashmir and was posted at Khanyar police station. Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir, Manoj Sinha, strongly condemned the brutal killing of our braveheart police officer Arshad Ashraf Mir by terrorists. In a tweet he said, and I quote him, "This is the handiwork of enemies of humanity and peace. His supreme sacrifice won't go in vain. Terrorists will be punished for the act. Heartfelt condolences to the martyr's family." A world record was created on Sunday when 8 specially abled people reached Kumar Post at 15,632 feet on the Siachen Glacier. The Northern Command of the Indian Army said that Army Special Forces veterans made the Operation Blue Freedom a grand success. In Jammu and Kashmir, a 5-day-long all-women exhibition is underway. Women entrepreneurs from across the length and breadth of the country, or for that matter, the Union Territory, have been participating in the exhibition to display their products. The aim of the exhibition, that started on September 12th, is to empower women in Kashmir. And in today's episode of Saga of Freedom Struggle, we will listen in to the courageous and brave acts by a young revolutionary, Jatendra Nath Das. Now, this day also marks the launch of Operation Polo, which was aimed to integrate Hyderabad state into the territory of India. Let's see what's more in this report.
Today we bring you the story of a hero from Bengal. It was on this day in 1929, this great son of India, Jatendra Nath Das, made the supreme sacrifice for the freedom of the country at a young age of 25 years. Fondly called Jatin Das, he challenged the might of the British in his own unique way. Jatin Das was born on 27th October 1904 at Calcutta.
The devoted freedom fighter joined the Anushilan Samiti in Bengal at a young age. Later on, he teamed up with Bhagat Singh and his comrades in the Hindustan Socialist Republic Association. Jatin Das also participated in the non-cooperation movement when he was 17 years old. He was a brilliant student but chose to dedicate his life to the freedom movement.
The revolutionary freedom fighter could not see his jailed countrymen subjected to deplorable conditions by the British. Determined to seek better treatment of the Indian prisoners, he went on to a 63-day-long hunger strike in Lahore jail, which ultimately cost his own life. His sacrifice had the desired impact in terms of the jail authorities agreeing to improve conditions for political prisoners. He was arrested by the British on June 14, 1929, in connection with the Lahore conspiracy case, which relates to the killing of the British police officer John Saunders by the revolutionaries.
Jatin Das suffered numerous hardships during his hunger strike. He was brutally beaten up and efforts to force feed him damaged his lungs. After his death, his body was taken to Bengal. In Calcutta, Subhash Chandra Bose received his coffin at the Howrah railway station. Over 7 lakh people attended Jatin Das's funeral procession in the city. Subhash Chandra Bose called him the young Dadichi of the nation, the ancient Indian sage who also sacrificed his life for noble cause.
It was on this day in 1948 the Operation Polo was launched by the Indian Army to integrate the Hyderabad state into the territory of India. By 1948, most of the princely states had acceded to India, but the state of Hyderabad had chosen to join neither Pakistan nor India. The then Indian Home Minister Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel requested the Nizam to join India, but he refused. The Nizam initially approached the British government with the proposal to designate Hyderabad as a constitutional monarchy within the Commonwealth of Nations. The proposal was rejected by the last Viceroy of India, Lord Louis Mountbatten.
For many years, the Nizam was facing popular resistance led by the Arya Samaj. The State People's Congress, under the leadership of Swami Ramanand Tirth, demanding the integration of Hyderabad with India. Under the Nizam, an exploitative agricultural structure had come to be established in Hyderabad. 40% of the land was either directly owned by the Nizam or given by him to the elites in the form of Jagirs, special tenures. By the 1940, a movement of resistance was taking shape among the peasants against the Nizam and his policies, and it reached its zenith by 1946.
On September 13, 1948, Indian forces entered the state at 4 a.m. under the Operation Polo. At 5 p.m. on 17 September 1948, the Nizam announced a ceasefire. Subsequently, he signed an instrument of accession joining India.
All right, let's get to updates from Afghanistan now. Even the humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan reaches alarming levels. Taliban continues to issue new diktats that run contrary to their promises of running a liberal regime. The situation there is so bad that there are no food items in shops, and whatever little is available is so high priced that most Afghans cannot afford it. There is no money in the ATMs and banks, and even as most schools and universities are closed, Taliban Education Minister came out with a new diktat on Sunday. He said that women can continue to study in universities, including at postgraduate levels, but classrooms will be gender segregated and hijab is compulsory.
Even as the all-male government, comprising mainly of old guard Taliban hardliners, insists that women will be allowed to work in Taliban's Afghanistan, concerns persist regarding the rights of women and girls under the new dispensation. The Taliban's announcements don't inspire much confidence either. Afghanistan's acting higher education minister on Sunday said gender segregation would be enforced in universities and protocols are being put in place so that women can continue their studies.
When there is really a need, men can also teach, but in accordance with Sharia, they should observe the will, and there is a need for a curtain in the classroom so that the teacher can teach the students, and by using some facilities such as TV screens or other modern devices.
Earlier in the month, students started returning to university classrooms after Taliban stormed to power, and in some cases females have been separated from their peers by curtains. Many are demanding that Taliban should reopen schools fast.
We demand from the new government to reopen universities because currently we have no prospect for our future. We are in a critical situation and banks are closed. There is no educational activity at schools.
Arrangements should be made so that nobody should be deprived from going to universities because children, adults, teachers are at home and they can't go to their educational institutions.
However, amidst all these efforts, the international community has serious concerns regarding the Afghan soil being used for terrorist activities against other countries. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin in an interview said that U.S. will continue to pay attention to threats emanating from Afghanistan.
We have to maintain a focus in order to defend this country, which is my top priority. We have to maintain a focus on countering transnational terrorism and preventing terrorists from exporting terror from any place on the globe to our homeland. We pay attention to the threats as they evolve.
In another development, the financial situation in Afghanistan continues to be precarious. The country's central bank has ordered the banks partnering with Western Union to pay out remittances in Afghani's currency only to preserve scarce US dollars. Meanwhile, Qatari Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani met with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow and discussed regional developments and exchanged views on strengthening international cooperation to support stability in Afghanistan. The food crisis in Afghanistan is also getting worse by the day. UN's World Food Programme said that food security in Afghanistan has deteriorated in the last month. Food prices are getting higher and incomes lower. People are eating less, increasingly relying on coping strategies such as borrowing money and food, and are unable to reach markets in several parts of the country. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has convened a high-level humanitarian conference on the Afghan situation on Monday. Guterres has appealed to the international community to come together in solidarity with the Afghan people, especially children and women. Guterres is travelling to Geneva to hold a ministerial meeting to advocate for a swift scale-up in funding and full, unimpeded access to those in need. Bureau Report, DD India.
And in more developments, Qatar's foreign minister held talks with the head of the newly appointed interim government of Afghanistan, Mohammad Hassan Akhund, on Sunday. According to the Qatar ministry, the meeting discussed ways of promoting peace in Afghanistan and also the latest developments regarding the operation of Kabul airport and ensuring freedom of passage and travel for all. The two sides stressed on the importance of concerted efforts to combat terrorist organizations that threaten the stability of Afghanistan. Qatar Foreign Minister urged the Afghan officials to engage all Afghan parties in the national reconciliation. Thani also met former Afghan President Hamid Karzai and Chairman High Council for National Reconciliation of Afghanistan, Abdullah Abdullah, in Kabul. Qatar Foreign Minister praised their efforts in negotiations hosted by Doha and reiterated Qatar's commitment to support all efforts that would lead to realizing the national reconciliation in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the Collective Security Treaty Organization's forces rehearsed military action against a possible terrorist threat at the Edelweiss shooting range near the town of Balkhchi in Kyrgyzstan. The joint forces of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia and Tajikistan practiced a ground operation with the assistance of the Air Force. Russian Defense Ministry said that the drills involved test fire from S-300 air defense system in a simulated attack on the base. They are the third set of drills by Russia close to the Afghan border this month. Next month, the CSTO will hold another exercise in Kyrgyzstan, which hosts a Russian military airbase. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said last week that Moscow would work more closely with CSTO members as the withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan raises regional security risks. Meanwhile, the health facilities across Afghanistan are rapidly running out of supplies. Doctors and healthcare nurses at Kabul Emergency Hospital say that they are running out of medicines, basic and emergency needs of critical patients in the ICUs. Hospital and health centers have stopped receiving equipment and also medicines since the international community froze funds to Afghanistan when the Taliban took over. Afghanistan imports almost 100% of the equipment and medicines it consumes, and with the external supply switched off, NGOs warn that the Afghan health system is approaching a collapse. Many hospital workers have not been paid for 3 months now. Many female doctors and nurses have stayed at home out of fear, and many others have left the country. Meanwhile, fuel imports, including fuel and gas, have resumed through the Hayrathan-Akina border crossing. However, high price of the fuel is a cause of concern among residents, particularly the taxi drivers. At present, a litre of oil sells for 61 Afghanis and a litre of gas for 70 Afghanis in bulk. Also, officials at the Balkh Chamber of Commerce and Investment, however, say that despite the resumption of oil and gas imports through the Hayrathan border crossing, restrictions on dollar trading have prevented Afghan traders from paying for fuel to oil companies in Central Asian countries to deliver on time. The first group of Afghan evacuees has arrived in Japan to take refuge in the nation. The evacuees were among around 10 Afghans who had last week entered neighboring country Pakistan by land. The 4 persons among them were local workers for Japan International Cooperation Agency in Afghanistan and their family members. The Afghans arrived via Doha in the Gulf state of Qatar. Arrangements are being made for the remainder of the group to head to Japan in the near future. Up next, a quick look at the global COVID situation from across the world. As per the figures, over 22.54 crore people have contracted the virus, while over 20 lakh people have recovered worldwide. More than 43,000 people have lost their lives due to the virus. The United States has been the worst affected country since the start of the pandemic and remains so as the Delta variant has accelerated the case tally. The US has more than 4 crore 18 lakh cases reported of COVID, and also 6,77,000 deaths have been reported in the country so far. In Australia's New South Wales, the pace of COVID-19 vaccinations has slowed as the first dose coverage has neared 80%. The authorities there have urged the unvaccinated to get their shot soon or risk missing out on freedom when curbs ease. Premier Gladys has promised to relax some tough restrictions for the state's 8 million residents once two-dose vaccination rates hit 70%. So far, about 46% of the adult population has been fully vaccinated, higher than the national average of 42%. Australia is scrambling to control outbreaks of the highly infectious Delta variant of the novel virus that began in Sydney in June. A total of 1,257 new cases were registered in New South Wales, down from 1,262 on Sunday, while neighbouring Victoria reported 473 infections. That is the biggest one-day rise for 2021.
The government is yet to finalise its plans in relation to what happens at 80% double dose. And our key message is come forward and get vaccinated, because once we start opening up at 70% double dose vaccination, the higher the rate of adult coverage of people 16 and over that are vaccinated, the better it is for all of us. For those of you who choose not to be vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't expect to do everything that vaccinated people do, even when we hit 80%. And I want to make that very clear. Our strong message today from the public health team, from myself and the New South Wales government, is come forward and get vaccinated. Because all of us fear what will happen to those around us who aren't vaccinated, but also please think about our hospital staff and those that have to take care of people with COVID. We want to protect them as much as we protect each other and our loved ones.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will this week set out plans to manage COVID pandemic over the colder months, suggesting the government could remove some restrictions by relying on vaccines. Announcing a decision to scrap the introduction of vaccine passports and steps to end some emergency powers, Britain's Health Secretary said that authorities have decided not to require vaccine passports for entry into nightclubs and other crowded events in England, reversing the course amidst opposition from some of the Conservative government's supporters in Parliament. Health Secretary Sajid Javid said that the government has shelved the idea of vaccine passports for now, but could reconsider the decision if COVID cases rise exponentially once again. The U-turn came just days after the government's Vaccines Minister and the Culture Secretary suggested that the vaccine passports could still be necessary. Despite growing opposition from lawmakers, such passports are required in other European countries like France.
There's a lot of defences, as we've just gone through some of them, that we need to keep in place here, because this virus hasn't gone anywhere. There's still a pandemic, so of course we need to remain cautious. But we just shouldn't be doing things for the sake of it or because others are doing it. We should look at every possible intervention properly. So you asked about vaccine passports. So I think it's fair to say, I think most people probably instinctively don't like the idea. I mean, I've never liked the idea of saying to people, you must show your papers or something to do what is just an everyday activity. But we were right to to properly look at it, to look at the evidence. And whilst we should keep it in reserve as a potential option, I'm pleased to say that we will not be going ahead with plans for vaccine passports.
In Bangladesh, schools reopen after nearly 18 months as the COVID-19 situation in the country eased over the last few days. Majority of the students will still not be attending the classes on a daily basis, as the government has allowed only students of classes 5th, 10th and 12th to attend the classes on a daily basis. Other students from classes 1st to 4th and 6th to 9th and the 11th standard will attend classes once a week till the government decides to open the schools for everyone on a daily basis. Students, teachers and other staff members are attending the classes with strict government instructions to follow the health guidelines. Cautioning against any laxity in maintaining health guidelines, Education Minister Deepu Moni told media on Sunday that in case there is a spike in infection, the schools will be closed again. Schools in Bangladesh have remained closed since March 17th last year after the first COVID case was detected on March 8th in the country. Time now for a short break. You're watching News on the Hour. Stay with us. We'll be back in a short while.
Namaste land. Marhaban ila al-Hind.
Zari India. Salam India.
Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
نحن هنود
India.
ما हिंदी हस्ती
Hindian.
Salam Hindustan.
We are India.
Your window to rising India. India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in all Southeast Asian countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching News on the Hour, and in more international updates, the United Nations watchdog reached an agreement with Iran on Sunday to solve the most urgent issue between the two sides. Now, Iran has agreed to allow the UN nuclear watchdog to service cameras used to monitor Iranian nuclear sites. International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors will also be allowed to replace the camera's memory cards, and they will be kept in Iran. Both sides recalled and reaffirmed the spirit of cooperation and also mutual trust and its continuation, and emphasized on the necessity of addressing the relevant issues in a constructive atmosphere and exclusively in a technical manner. IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi obtained the agreement in a last-minute trip to Tehran. He called constructive before the meeting of his agency's 35-nation Board of Governors this week. He told reporters at Vienna airport that the communication breakdown with Iran had been solved, but that a permanent solution still needed to be found.
Very short but very constructive trip, which I believe helps keeping the process in a good direction, and will hopefully bring us closer to solve some of the important issues that we still have to solve. My first concern when traveling there was that we had a major communication breakdown with Iran, which of course is something we cannot afford, having so many important issues that we need to solve. And I think that was solved.
North Korea has successfully test-fired new type long-range cruise missile on September 11th and 12th, contracting up tensions as US President Joe Biden's nuclear envoy heads to Asia for talks. North Korea carried out successful tests of a new long-range cruise missile over the weekend amidst a protracted standoff with the United States over denuclearization. The missiles flew 1,500 kilometers before hitting their targets and falling into the country's territorial waters during the tests. The photographs released show the missile being launched from a transporter erector launcher and was flying, and it was seen as North's first missile launch after it tested a new tactical short-range ballistic missile in March. North Korea also conducted a cruise missile test just hours after US President Joe Biden took office in late January. Australian Defence Minister Peter Dutton held a meeting with his South Korean counterpart in Seoul today after North Korea said that it carried out tests of a new long-range cruise missile over the weekend. Dutton and Soo did not mention about North Korea's missile launch during the opening remarks of their meeting, but emphasized on the importance of regional security amidst increasing threats. South Korea and Australia are set to hold 2+2 talks involving their foreign and defense ministers today to discuss bilateral cooperation and also regional security. South Korean Foreign Minister and Defense Minister are scheduled to meet with their Australian counterparts during their 5th ministerial talks slated for later in the day. Their previous talks were held in Sydney in December 2019. The four will hold a joint press conference following the talks. South Korea has said that it is cooperating with the United States on a detailed analysis with regard to North Korea's latest missile test. Earlier in the day, the North's state media reported that it had carried out successful tests of a new long-range cruise missile over the weekend, seen by analysts as possibly the country's first such weapon with a nuclear capability. Lee Jong-ju, spokeswoman of the Ministry of Unification, which handles inter-Korean affairs, said the ministry is working on monitoring the North's movements. It was seen as the North's first missile launch after it tested a new tactical short-range ballistic missile in March. North Korea also conducted a cruise missile test just hours after US President Joe Biden took office in late January. Spanish wildfire rages close to a resort in Costa del Sol, pressing mass evacuation in at least 6 more Andalusian towns and villages. The country has deployed military units to tackle the blazes. The wildfire, fanned by strong winds, has forced around 2,000 people to flee their homes and killed 1 emergency worker since it erupted. Huge plumes of smoke rising above the mountains could be seen from miles away. Footage released by emergency services showed firefighters trying to contain flames in the dry, wooded terrain. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez had announced the deployment of military earlier to douse the inferno that has so far covered 6,000 hectares of land, according to the European Commission's Copernicus satellite. In Philippines, strong winds and heavy rainfall dumped the northernmost islands as Typhoon Chantu swept across the country. The typhoon prompted power cuts and leaving a trail of destruction. It destroyed houses in the town of Saptan, slowly easing as the typhoon moved further away. However, no casualties have been reported so far. Chantu, with gusts packing up to 280 kilometers per hour, was originally a Category 5 typhoon when it struck the northern islands of Batanes on Saturday. It has since been downgraded to a Category 3 typhoon and as it moved closer to Taiwan. In Brazil, resentment simmered against President Jair Bolsonaro, leading the Brazilians to protest in Sao Paulo's Paulista Avenue, demanding his impeachment. The protesters, outraged of Bolsonaro's handling of the virus in the country, carried flags and slogans of Bolsonaro out. Bolsonaro's popularity has nosedived in the country, and the demonstrations took place days after he urged his sympathizers to mobilize against his perceived enemies in Congress and the courts on Independence Day. Earlier this week, the president said that he would no longer comply with certain Supreme Court rulings, deepening a rift with the judiciary and hurting Brazilian markets. Bolsonaro apologized days later, saying that his recent attacks came from the heat of the moment. And Iraq's Prime Minister Mustafa Al-Kadhimi and Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi held a joint news conference on Sunday. Iraq's Prime Minister Kadhimi has become the first world leader to visit Iran after the new president assumed office there. The two leaders stressed on the importance of strengthening ties between the neighboring countries. Iraqi Prime Minister thanked Iran for standing by Iraq in its fight against ISIS. Iraq has been trying to mediate between Tehran and its Gulf Arab foes, including Saudi Arabia, in the hope of stopping its neighbors settling scores on its territory. In Argentina yesterday, voters flocked to the poll stations on Sunday in congressional primaries that represent an acid test for the center-left Peronist government of President Alberto Fernandez, as the pandemic and rising poverty have weakened its popularity. Polling stations shut yesterday evening, although some voters were still casting ballots after long lines during the day. Results are expected later in the evening today, with pollsters expecting the ruling party to suffer some losses. The vote is in effect a huge straw poll on the ruling party ahead of November 14 ballot, where 127 seats in the Chamber of Deputies are up for grabs out of a total of 257, as well as 24 seats out of 72 in the Senate. Along with the general public, Argentine President Alberto Fernandez voted on Sunday in midterm primaries that represent a litmus test for his center-left Peronist government, as the pandemic and rising poverty have weakened its popularity. In Russia, at least 4 people lost their lives in a plane crash. The Russian passenger plane with 14 passengers and crew on board made an emergency landing in southeastern Siberia. The preliminary reports by local emergency services cite equipment failure to be the cause of the crash. Initial media reports say that 11 people have been trapped inside the aircraft after it came down. Rescue workers rushed to the spot with stretchers and shining torches near the river. Another billionaire entrepreneur is set to ride into space this week, strapped inside the capsule of a SpaceX rocket ship as part of an Astro Tourist team poised to make history as the first all-civilian crew launched into Earth orbit. Jard Isaacman, the American founder and chief executive of an e-commerce firm, will lead 3 fellow spaceflight novices on a trip expected to last 3 days from blastoff at Cape Canaveral, Florida, to splash down in the Atlantic. The crew vehicle is set for blastoff from NASA's Kennedy Space Center atop one of Musk's reusable Falcon 9 rockets, with a 24-hour targeted launch window that opens on Wednesday. The SpaceX flight is designed to carry its 4 passengers, where no all-civilian crew has gone before, into Earth orbit. Dubbed Inspiration 4, the orbital outing was conceived by Isaacman primarily to raise awareness and support for one of his favorite causes, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, a leading pediatric cancer center. Russian actress Elena Mordovina, cameraman Alexei Dudin, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Artemev attended the final exams at Star City Cosmonaut Training Center ahead of the space launch for the movie to be filmed at the International Space Station. Cosmonaut Anton Shkaplerov, who is scheduled to launch towards the orbiting lab aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft on October 5th, also got final medical clearance. The movie would tell about a female surgeon's mission to perform an operation on a cosmonaut too ill to go back to Earth immediately. The movie has the working title Challenge. Russian Space Agency Roscosmos says that it wants to open up space for a wider range of people. You're watching News on the Hour. Up next, we're heading for a short break. When we come back, we'll get you sports updates. Stay with us.